On today's edition, I will be discussing with Honorable Babangida Ibrahim, Chairman House Committee on Capital Market. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Sir, reaction have continued trend the proposed 20.51 trillion naira 2023 national budget with an oil benchmark fixed at $70 per barrel. Some economic experts said the budget amplifies troubling fiscal outlook for Nigerian economy, given the country's dwindling revenue performance trajectory. So what do you think about that, sir?
Well, actually, if you look at 2023 budgets, sometimes one want to wonder what is the intention or what they want to achieve. What is important is that 2023 is a transitional budget, which means that there's every likelihood that this current government may implement the budget, which means if the APC is lucky to win the presidential election, the assumption is they may maintain the same agenda. But as a transition budget, if APC lose election, then which means the current government is not likely to implement the budget. That is the more reason why I feel they should have been less ambitious with 2023 budget. We should have at least, government should have presented a realistic budget, something that we can manage, because if you say you have a revenue of 9.7 trillion and you have a budget of 20.5 trillion, then which means you have a deficit of over 10.7 trillion. And with that size of deficit, if you look at the financing of the deficit, they say debt servicing and bilateral and multilateral and sales of government assets, they are going to use those ones to finance the deficit. Already a provision has been made for debt servicing in the budget, 2023 budget, then which means there is every likelihood that the government has to go out again to source for additional money. Because if the financing of deficit 8.8 is from debt servicing and a provision of 6.5 was made, then there is a gap. Also, part of the debt financing and deficit financing, they also provide for multilateral and bilateral provisions. So if you add it up, at the end of the day, they are likely they must borrow 4 trillion to finance the budget. The question is whether the governments will be able to do so is something else. But they should have been less ambitious with 2023 budget, because the budget is in between. There's a likelihood that the government will continue their own agenda if by chance APC win the presidential election, and if APC lose the presidential election, which means the incoming government will be faced with a lot of challenges.
Okay, looking at funding the budget, our expenditure continues to accelerate amid consistent weak revenue performance. We have a budget of 20.51 trillion naira and revenue projection of 9.73 trillion naira. This is a deficit of 10.78 trillion naira. In all probability, the deficit will be much bigger by year end. Because of the track record of revenue underperformance over the last couple of years, and we are about to borrow 8.8 trillion naira for the budget. My question here is, can't we focus on return of our investments, especially within the maritime, oil and gas enterprises, to find the budget than borrowing?
Well, you see, alternatives, there is no alternative for borrowing, whether you do it locally or whatever. What is important is the cost of funds. But you see, if you look at the inflation, the rate of inflation currently is above 2 digits, and that is even what is making managing the budget very difficult. Because you are preparing the budget in October, and possibly the budget will be passed by December. I can categorically tell you between now and December, the prices, estimated projected prices especially with regard to capital expenditure, will completely vary. There will be a lot of increases in the prices of most of the capital items that are likely to be executed during the budget. And you see, what I want to advise is that, you see, if you look at the component of revenue, part of it is includes sales of crude. And sales of crude, we have no control. The only level of control we have, even that one is a limited control, it has to do with the production. And already, if a provision is made in the budget, whatever is extra outside the provision, it goes to assess crude account. It will not be factor for the purpose of building the budget. So what I want to say is that with regard to 2023 budget, the tax revenue, the emphasis should be more on tax revenue and independent revenue. I'm aware before the passage of the budget, or before the presentation of the budget during the MTech stakeholders engagement, the Committee on Finance of the House has emphasized on the issue of revenue, independent revenue, which is supposed to be remitted by most of the MDEs in line with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. I think the Committee of Finance is doing well, and if the status quo is maintained, where each and every ministry, department, or agency will remit what is appropriate and what is due to them, I believe it will help with regard to the inflow of revenue. And also, I want to advise that the tax revenue should also be more aggressive, so that we'll be able to meet up. In the past, we discovered that the tax revenue range between 80 to 90%. So this time around, we should be able to exceed 100% in order to reduce the size of deficit. You see, what to understand is that, you see, whatever is contained in the budget is just a provision. The provision of revenue is also a provision. The government can collect more than 9.7, and also the deficit is also a provision. This means if effort is made by relevant government agencies in terms of revenue generation, the size of the deficit will reduce, and which means the borrowing also will also reduce. So it all depends on the government. That's why I said from the beginning, the government should not have been very ambitious, because it's a transitional budget. Yeah.
Thank you very much. For the problem of budgeting in Nigeria is budget implementation, because Nigeria is totally behind when it comes to implementation. How can we solve these problems, sir?
You see, the major challenge of budget implementation has to do with budget overlapping. If you remember, the 2022-2021 budget, I think, was extended up to May of 2021. And what we've been shouting for a very long time is that, you see, budget has three components. There's the personnel cost, the overhead, and the capital. You see, the personnel cost is being operated January to December. The recurrent also run January to December. It's only capital item that overlap to the following year. But because of certain interests, I don't know why they always allow the overlapping of budget, because the overlapping of budget is what affects the incoming budget. Because if you are doing a real budgeting, you see, whatever amount of money you spend on a particular capital item, whatever is pending, you carry it forward to the following year. If there is any revenue, you took it also, you carry it forward. But what they do is that they will hang the budget and continue implementing the previous budget at the expense of the current budget. That's what's causing a lot of problems. I say it is high time we come down to real budgeting. Let us tell ourselves the truth. If you have a capital item, you pay most of the capital projects by certification. So you pay according to the certificate that's available. Any contractor that was not able to meet up, you forward the budget. But I think what they are trying to control, they are trying to control the sizing of the budget. Because if you have a capital of, for example, 4 trillion, and you are not able to implement up to 2.5 trillion in the current year, automatically, if there is no window of overlapping, you are transferring 1.5 trillion, possibly equivalent revenue and equivalent expenditure to the following budget. Let me give you an example. Assuming in 2022, we were not able to to implement the capital aspect of the budget 100%. And they now allow it to overlap to 2023 budget. Like I said, the 2021 budget extended to May. So if we extend 2022 to May, automatically it will be extended to the lifespan of this government, which is terminating by May. So automatically there is no way they can say, okay, let us transfer the equivalent revenue that is supposed to be used to finance those capital assets to the following year. It will affect and increase the size of the 2023 budget. I think that's what they are trying to control. And most of the things that is affected capital budget implementation, it has to do with the rainy season. And because you see, most of the road contracts cannot be fully executed during the rainy season. Another factor that is affecting us is the issue of insecurity. There are certain locations that you cannot go. Even if it has to do with constructions of building or other capital items, the contractors may have some level of fear to be there in the site to continue executing the project. But what is important is that we should try as much as possible to start implementing the budget early enough so that we don't need to allow overlapping of budget to the incoming budget.
Okay, thank you very much. That was wonderful. Lastly, before we come to the end of this program, let me just have your opinion on this issue of oil theft, because it's obvious that it's eating our economy on a daily basis. So what is the solution on this?
You see, the solution for oil theft is that we should tell ourselves the truth. You see, number one, government itself has to be very vigilant. I believe there is no way somebody will come to the Nigerian water, territorial water, without the government knowing about that one. If somebody can do that, which means all of us are at risk. Because most of these oil thefts, whether it is locally or whether it is international, I believe we should have the capacity to be able to monitor most of these actions. And I think based on the recent exposure, the government is trying its best to make sure that it's reduced to minimum. But you see, oil theft or no oil theft, I believe is not an official channel of revenue generation. It's only a kind of a loss because it's affecting the production indirectly. That's why for a very long time we've been proposing about 2 billion production per day. We were not able to meet it to the extent that it has to even go down this year. Our production at the projection is about 1.6, 1.7. So I think the oil theft is affecting our production, and indirectly it will affect the budget at the end of the day. But government should be more vigilant because this is something that has been happening for a very long time. It is only recently that it has been exposed. So it is a responsibility of government to make sure that these things are stopped. That's my own opinion, because there's nothing anybody can do about it. It has been happening. It has not been exposed until recently. So, and the government is making all effort to make sure that these things are reduced to the barest minimum, because it may not be possible to do so completely, because these two few areas that were identified might not be the only ones. Maybe there are other ones in other locations that we are to discover. But I think government should be more vigilant and on this issue of reducing the oil thefts.